So in this video, I'm be talking about my Nikon D5200 and is it actually worth using or even buying in 2018? As most of you may know, I still use my Nikon D5200 for my professional shoots sometimes and videos, as well as for this own YouTube channel. But if you didn't know, the Nikon D5200 was released in 2012 and for the rest of the world in 2013. In other words, this camera has been out for 5 to even 6 years now. And you're wondering, is it still worth it? Is it starting to be outdated? Is this camera even worth buying nowadays? And this is going to be my overall 2 cents on my Nikon D5200. And if you haven't seen my other video on my camera and why you shouldn't buy this camera for video, link is in the description of why you should not buy a Nikon for video. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be talking about what I love about my D5200 as well as what I hate about my D5200. So straight off the bat, the D5200 features an EXPEED 3 sensor and it can shoot specifically for videos in 1080p, but in only 24 frames per second. And if you had to shoot in 60 frames per second or slow motion, you would have to downgrade to 720p, which I would say is the biggest downfall if you decide to buy a Nikon D5200 for video. And my other gripe about the D5200 is that the battery life isn't the greatest for this camera, as well as low light situations. I would say even if you put on a constant lens like I have right now, which is the Sigma 17-50 constant 2.8 aperture on this Nikon camera, which does give it a little upgrade to use since it is a much faster lens and it's good for video with optical stabilization, using this Nikon nowadays is starting to get outdated. In other words, there's no internal image stabilization. The battery life is okay, but I do run through batteries on a typical, let's say, a 4 to 5 hour shoot. I would use anywhere from 3 to even 6 batteries, depending on the intensity of filming. And another thing is there's a 20-minute, as you can see here in the corner, a 20-minute time limit every time you record. So you can only record clips up to 20 minutes. Besides the overall build function, I would say the D5200 is a little bulky, and the overall structure and feel of it is a lot heavier compared to its counterparts and competition. As you know now, I have talked really much in depth about the D5200 on this channel and my overall love for this camera, because not only was it one of the first APS-C cameras that I bought, but this is the camera that I have been using for a lot of my video work. But as going into 2018 and even 2019, do I recommend people buy this D5200? Well, there's a couple things to consider. Your budget, and are you focused on video? Because looking back, if I had to decide of whether or not do I still stick with the Nikon line, would I pick the D5200? No. Because one of the things, I'll talk about this in another video, is that the D5200 is currently discontinued and Nikon does not longer support this model. And on top of that, it does not film it films in 720p, 60 frames per second. You can get 1080p in 60 frames per second. And nowadays, with things being in 4K, having 4K is a good way to future-proof your videos and have better composition and higher video quality when it comes to cameras. And this Nikon is starting to show its age. You won't get as much battery life as, let's say, the D53 or 5500. And because Nikon no longer supports it, things such as firmware updates or any future problems that may occur, Nikon is not going to support this model anymore. But what I do recommend you purchase if you still want to stick within the Nikon line is something along the lines of a D53, 55, and 5600, or even the 7000 model series if you still want to stick with Nikon specifically for video. I'm not bashing on my D5200. It has a very soft spot in my heart, and it taught me the basics of videography and showing that just because I don't have the best equipment to get started with, you can definitely create awesome things through learning how to use a camera, learning composition, learning how to edit, and not really relying specifically on the camera, but you as a filmmaker to produce great quality videos. But now going further into content creation and seeing things like 4K footage and experimenting with different types of cameras, you could say that the Nikon D5200 is about to die out. But it's not the end of the world. And there's definitely within the Nikon line some cameras that you can definitely still consider when it comes to video. So if I did recommend you buy it and you stick within the Nikon line, I would still recommend the D5000 models, but not the D5000, 51, or 5200, as these are much older models. But as you can see from this channel and the types of videos that I've been able to produce, this camera should not limit you to the things that you can create. There's so many awesome things, and yes, if you definitely still film this video for your YouTube videos or any of your vlogs, this camera still can perform. And I have not gotten any video complaints or image qualities when I film in 1080p 24 frames per second with this camera. So to sum up this video, the D5200 is about to be extinct. As saddening as that is, as within the last year, Nikon has decided to discontinue its support for this camera, but this camera will always have a place in my heart. And to prove that you don't need the best video camera equipment to jumpstart your filmmaking career. Does video quality matter for the long run? Of course, but always I've been a preacher of use what you got. I don't recommend you buy the D5200, but it is definitely still a viable camera to use in this day specifically, even if you want to do your vlogs or talking head videos, or you're much more of a beginner or entry level. The D5000 model for video is still, in this day and age, a good camera to use. But like I said, if you want to future-proof yourself or have things like longer battery life, be able to shoot in slow motion, picture profiles, then look somewhere along the lines of the D53, 55, and 5600, or even D7000, D500 models for Nikon. My name is Peter. You're watching Broke Visionary Collective, where we all start with nothing, but you can always create something.